Iowa State made a really good move. Iowa State made a really good, savvy move, and I do think it ties into the North Carolina job. In contrast to West Virginia and UCF, Iowa State has their current Scott Frost and their current Rich Rod, the guy who means that type of thing to their program. They've got him right now, and they just locked him up with an 8-year contract extension after I have been told he turned down another job. So more on that in just a moment. But this is such a rock-solid move for Iowa State as we have the coaching carousel going on, which is sexier, and signing a coach to an extension, especially after a blowout Big 12 championship game loss, may slide under the radar a little bit. But Campbell is locked down. So Iowa State head coach Matt Campbell has agreed to a new 8-year contract through the 2032 season. The school announced today. Campbell led the Cyclones to their first 10-win season in school history this year. He had recently been linked to the North Carolina opening. Financial terms were not disclosed. Frankly, I don't know that it really matters. He's worth whatever you're going to pay him. At Iowa State, pulling in the first 10-win season ever, and just the high floor that he has as a coach that I've long talked about, that is very much worth whatever money Iowa State is going to pay him. And now he has proven that he's got a higher ceiling than I gave him credit for at the beginning of the year. And I know, like Iowa State fans, I've seen some of you coming after me for those comments that I made at the beginning of the year, that I just doubted what his ceiling would be. It's why I didn't pick them 1 or 2 in the Big 12 this year. Because the one time he made the Big 12 championship game, it was COVID, and I think they either had incredible COVID luck or just weren't as strict about it as everybody else. And we had a lot of weird things happening that year. Texas A&M, North Carolina. I think it indicates that was a bit of a weird, fluky year. Iowa State fans don't want to hear that. Understood. I get it. This has proven any of that. Like, hey, the guy has a Big 12 championship game ceiling. The guy has a 10-win ceiling. He's done it. He proved it, and he did all of that coming back from the dead after having a 4-win season with a massive scandal that cost him a bunch of players, including his quarterback. So Matt Campbell has now shown you he's got the ceiling to go with the high floor. You pay him whatever the hell it is that you've got to pay him. We got a quote from Jamie Pollard giving all the uncertainty facing college athletics. It was critical we moved quick to solidify the future of our program. Hey, agreed on that. It is definitely something to do. Campbell, 9th season, longest tenured coach in school history, behind Dan McCarney and Clay Stapleton. Good old Clay Stapleton. Who could forget the Clay Stapleton era? And he already has the most wins in school history. He surpassed that earlier this year. So you got to lock him up. And Iowa State did. I know that the joke, like, I have the bit. By the way, I capitalized Iowa State fans on my bit today, and I tweeted Iowa State head coach Matt Campbell, which is like, we've come full circle on this entire bit with Matt Campbell, where, he's been mentioned for just about every major Power 4 job that came open within the last, 7 years. When did he first win at Oklahoma? Whenever he first won in Norman, was that 17? Ever since that happened, the guy's been mentioned for every major Power 4 job opening, but has obviously never jumped to take that. So it came as absolutely no surprise when earlier, I guess within the last week, we saw his name coming up for North Carolina. It was in the mix at North Carolina. It sounded like the Tar Heels really did like him as a candidate there, but I was told he did turn that job down. And you just saw the line in the story there from Pete Thamel that he was someone who had been mentioned there. So they're not officially reporting like anything was turned down, but it's clear that there was interest in Matt Campbell from North Carolina. That is not a job that would have really scared me if I were an Iowa State fan, especially at this point when you're this far down the road and his name has been out there for so many jobs. But it just, North Carolina is not something I would be interested in, especially for him. Like, you think about North Carolina is definitely like the country club vibe. North Carolina is country club. Why do you think Mac Brown went from Texas, the ultimate country club, to North Carolina? It's a job for that type of guy, which is weird again that Bill Belichick winds up taking the job. He does not come across as the warmest, friendliest guy But it's one where you've got to manage a lot of cooks in the kitchen. That's another thing that's come out through this process is that North Carolina's got a lot of people trying to make decisions. Anyone who's followed this channel throughout realignment knows all about that because the realignment decisions, and is it SEC or Big Ten? And there were factions of people who want to go to the SEC, people who want to go to the Big Ten, or people who want to stay in the ACC. You just got a lot of people, a lot of cooks in the kitchens, what that phrase was made for with what's going on at North Carolina. And it appears that's how it really played out with their head coaching search and how this went down. But beyond just that, like country club culture, way too many cooks in the kitchen. You're going to have to deal with stuff that you don't really want to deal with and that you don't have to deal with at Iowa State. Will you get full throat support for football? You know, this is a place where basketball is king. Will you actually get full support for football? I'm sure they could try to give him some assurances for that. You're always going to be playing second fiddle to North Carolina hoops in some regard. And especially I would want to know what's the commitment going to be if we are joining a Power 2 conference, which seems likely at some point in the future. North Carolina is the most coveted realignment piece on the board, not named Notre Dame. So eventually they're going to be in another conference. That feels very much inevitable. It's just a matter probably of when, not if. If it is something that happens soon, you know, realignment can happen very quickly. If it is something that happens soon, you damn well better have the full throat resources that you need and support that you need if you're going to take that job. So I get it. Makes a lot of sense for Campbell. Makes a lot of sense for Iowa State. It's a good move, honestly, for the league. Like if you're a Big 12 fan, good to keep him around. We'll see what the rest of the coaching carousel brings. Really, I guess the only other thing you'd be thinking of if you are an Iowa State fan is, all right, well, what's going to happen with Ryan Day? If Ohio State goes out there and chokes at home to Tennessee, is Ryan Day going to get run? And then do you have to start to worry about that? Maybe so, perhaps. But for now, that's got to feel pretty good if you are an Iowa State fan, and pretty good, honestly, just if you're a general Big 12 fan about keeping him around. Now, as for Utah, okay, I said Utah also, like Iowa State, made a pretty sneaky, somewhat under the radar move that I think could pay massive dividends for them. And it's crazy for me to have to say that, like, Utah is a sneaky team in the Big 12 to watch out for this upcoming year because they were the preseason pick to win the league last year in their first year in the Big 12. But I think it's really easy right now for people to be out on Utah. And I'm here to tell you, you should not be out on Utah. You should not let this, Big 12 fans especially, because this is the year that you've watched them more closely than you have over the last few. I would not put Utah out of your mind in terms of like who can win this league, who can be really good next year. Because they signed quarterback Devin Dampier from New Mexico. Okay. He's also coming to follow his offensive coordinator, Jason Beck, who Utah brought in to be the OC. This is a very, very good move that I love a lot for Utah. Devin Dampier is a really fun quarterback. And my apologies. I will be honest. I know that I could sit here and BS you and be like, man, I love this kid. I watched him a ton this year. No, I did not know much about him, and I may be pronouncing his name wrong. I did not know much about him before I saw that Utah brought him in. But I definitely raised an eyebrow. Like, all right, well, that's interesting. In the initial tweet you see, you're like, damn, that kid was putting up a ton of offense. Yeah, he was putting up a ton of offense. He was just a sophomore this year. The Lobos averaged 484 yards of offense per game, fourth best in the country. They scored 33 points per game, which is 27th in the country. He himself was top 10 in total offense per game in the country. And it was his first season as a full-time starter. He had 2,768 yards passing and 1,166 yards rushing. So you talk about a dual threat. Like, this kid is good. They even list in this write-up that I was reading about him his stats against Power 4 schools this year. Arizona, Auburn, Washington State. Okay, so they're saying former Power 5. Arizona, Auburn, Washington State. He threw for a combined 725 yards with 5 touchdowns and 4 picks. and he had 354 yards and 5 TDs on the ground. So if you add that up in those games, so that'd be about 1,079 total yards. You're looking at 330-ish per game and 10 touchdowns. So you're looking at 3 touchdowns per game, 300 yards total offense, 3 touchdowns per game against Power 5 competition. And look, before you start running and saying, well, dude, New Mexico finished 5-6 this year. I mean, come on. How good could they have possibly been? Is this a little bit hollow? You should probably take into account New Mexico's defense, which allowed 38 points and 492 yards per game. Kyle Whittingham, last I checked, will be handling the defense along with Morgan Scalley at Utah. So I don't think you need to worry about that. And the 5 wins, the 5-6 record, best since 2016 for New Mexico. So pretty good stuff here. Dan Pierce in pretty impressive territory when it comes to his accomplishments from this past year. Now, his offensive coordinator runs a spread offense. They use run-pass option a lot. It's at its best with a quarterback who can run, and that's definitely this dude. So the combination of those two I like a lot.